How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan. This is Carlo, and we are back for an Ono Play It, Skip It, number 12, I believe. I am doing I was going to say my math correct. It's not math. I just looked up the playlist, and it was, the last one was 11.
Yeah, if your memory serves you well.
Yeah. And we are back. We're going to do 4 games today. We're going to look over 4 games. We're going to tell you kind of like mini reviews if you haven't watched this series before, and we're going to tell you whether we think you should own it, play it, or skip it based on our opinions of the game and what we thought of them. So if you think you align with our opinions, this might give you some context on whether you should add these games to your collection, play them at a friend's, or just look at them on the shelf and walk away. One of the two. One of the 3. So I'm going to throw it over to Carlo. He's going to start. Actually, we should also say this is the first video we've done together in a few months now.
Yeah.
Yeah, busy schedules. I think if you watched the last video I did, I mentioned some of it in there, but we've had a very busy summer, me especially. But I didn't even say me especially, you too. You have a lot going on at home with the family and stuff, and I have a lot going on with my job. Braden's gone back to work and everything, so it's just lots going on right now, but we're happy to be back, and we're happy to talk about 4 awesome board games. Well,
and I would also say the kind of reduced content on the channel is not an indication of the future output of our channel. So bear with us through this, and we'll have a lot more videos coming soon.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to throw it over to Carlo, and you're going to give us the first game.
All right. So the first one here, and I'll just say right now in case we forget to mention, this is the only one of the 4 that is not a review copy.
Okay.
Right? But we'll try and say that part for each of those games anyway. But the first one I'm going to be talking about here is Oceans. So this is I believe it was a 2020 release published by North Star Games. There are, I believe, 4 or 5 designers, so I'm not going to list them all by name. Similar design team as the Evolution games, like Evolution Climate, etc.
Like a spiritual successor kind of thing, almost.
Yeah, exactly. So they've taken, but it's worth noting that they didn't call it Evolution: Oceans the same way that they did with like Evolution Flight and Evolution Climate. They're trying to make it feel like its own standalone game, and it's kind of, it shares a lot of similarities, but it is different enough. So for a while, I actually thought about doing a comparison video because, just a quick thing, Evolution Climate was used to be one of my top favorite games of all time. It was one of the first games I ever bought, maybe not first, but first 10, 15 games or so. I loved it, played it for a long time. Haven't played Oceans quite as much as Evolution. But anyway, so the basic concept here is that it is a sort of tableau building, engine building game where you are basically collecting cards. You're going to have anywhere from 1 to, I think, a max of 4 species in front of you. Each species that you create starts with a sort of just like a basic stats, and you're going to be getting, there's a big stack, or I guess there's 2 different decks of cards. There's a deck of sort of the more basic cards. I think there's 12 different ones that have a bunch of duplicates. And then I'll talk about the deep deck a little later, which is one of the most interesting things about this game. Yeah. But you're basically going through this deck of cards, gaining traits that you're going to be playing in front of your different species. So each species can hold up to 3 different traits that are going to affect how you're sort of collecting food or interacting with the other species around you. There's a decent amount of player interaction, both in terms of the take that aspects of kind of like attacking. You can get species that have some type of ability to attack other species, so sometimes that might mean your opponent's species, or if you can't attack them, you might have to feast on your own or go somewhere else to get food. So there's a lot of different ways to get food in this game. There's kind of different spots. So unlike in Evolution Climate, there was kind of one watering hole, and depending on cards that got played throughout the round and the way that the weather went, there would be a number of food determined based on all those other factors that came first. And then you'd either be just grabbing food from the watering hole or using your carnivores to kind of eat other animals. And in this, there's kind of an ocean with different sections, but then there's also a reef. I'm not going to get too much more into that aspect of the rules, but there's fish basically going back and forth, and when the ocean runs out of food is kind of what triggers, there's different triggers based on where the food is, and that triggers different aspects of the game, like the Cambrian explosion as well as the end of the game. So just in terms of comparing this to Evolution Climate, I will say it's a little friendlier, a little more welcoming, less punishing for sure. We've talked before. I mean, we did a video. If you want to know mine and Dylan's thoughts kind of on Evolution Climate, you can watch our, what was it, games we wish we liked more, or was it?
Or the one we disagree on.
Or games we disagree on or something, yeah. But there was one where basically, Dylan wasn't a huge fan of Evolution Climate.
That might have been the first game that, first board game that we had, not a major disagreement on, but I just mean our opinions
were quite different.
Yeah, that was the first one, because for a while, as we were first, especially when I was getting into board games, I felt like we were aligned on most of the games. We were playing a lot of the same games, or we had games we shared in the collection and stuff. But I felt like that was one where I sat down and I left, and I was like, I think I'm just missing something with it. And then every subsequent play of it, it just would not land with me in the same way that it was clearly landing with you. So.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, I will say the thing about Evolution Climate is because it's so punishing and you can just have like a carnivore eat 2 or 3 of your species and then it's like 2 or 3 rounds into the game and suddenly you're rebuilding with one species with no traits and you know someone else just got 30 points in a round when you got like 2 points, or like you can fall behind, and the more you play against players who've played it more, it kind of unevens the playing field, right? So Evolution Climate was very, very unforgiving like that. So in Oceans, I find it's a little bit easier to defend yourself. It's a little bit harder to attack other people. And the thing is, once you have sort of been attacked, like the way that the turns work is in Evolution Climate, almost everything is happening simultaneously. You're going through the phases together as a group, and then you're revealing cards and doing this stuff, so the game is moving at this pace. But in Oceans, you take turns, and on your turn, you go through all of these, I think it's 4 or 5 steps individually, and resolve your whole turn before someone else. And the part where you age and your population might die off, that happens after the part of your turn where you can actually play cards. So you might sense, like, I have the opportunity to still save this species before it dies if I can play the right cards, do the right things. So it's more forgiving in that sense. Whereas in Evolution Climate, sometimes you flip the traits and you look over and you're like, oh my God, that person's a carnivore now. I don't have the defense. And you just know there's nothing you can do at that point.
Yeah.
So again, this one's definitely more friendly, accessible, more welcoming, more, I wouldn't say it's quite family weight or gateway. There's definitely more rules than would be usual for like a gateway type game. Mm-hmm. The other comparison I want to make real quick is, again, going back to the rules, the way that kind of plays out with the simultaneous play in Evolution Climate versus taking turns in Oceans is Oceans has a lot more downtime, and I think also doesn't work as well at the higher player count. So the base game goes 2 to 4 players, but there's an expansion that can go up to 5 or 6. I don't think I ever played it even with 4. I think I've only played it with 2 and 3. Evolution Climate, while I think it worked best with 3 or 4, it was still good with 5 or 6. Oceans, I don't even know if I would want to play with 4, just because, again, the amount of downtime when you're waiting for other people, and you have to pay a lot of attention to what other people have in their tableaus, what cards, so that you know what's coming. And because things change so much when it's not your turn, by the time it gets around to you, you kind of have to restart the planning again.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say about rules real quick, because the most interesting part about this game, in my opinion, is about sort of around the halfway point, depending on how the food plays out and stuff, but at some point in the game there's going to be an event called the Cambrian Explosion. And again, up to this point, you're sharing cards from the same deck that only has a bunch of these duplicate cards. But once you hit the Cambrian Explosion, not only can you start, I think you can start playing more cards on your turn, but also you can start playing these cards from this deep deck. And the deep deck has, I don't know how many cards, a big stack, and each of those cards is completely unique and feels like game breaking.
Yeah.
So as it is, you're already finding these kind of basic combos with the base deck, but then on your turns, even before the Cambrian Explosion happens, you can draw cards from the deep deck instead of the regular deck, and that takes up part of your hand limit. And it reminds me of an interesting choice in Battle Line, where you have the battle cards and you only have a 7-card hand. And it's like you can draw another battle card or you can draw a tactics card, but if you draw a tactics card, you have fewer battle cards to pick from. And it's that kind of thing where you're like, do I want to get some of these deep cards to hold on to so I can plan to use this later, or do I want to just wait and then once we get to the Cambrian Explosion, draw a deep card and try to make it work?
Yeah.
But the earlier you take them, you're kind of limiting your other options. So there's that really interesting play, and I think that was...
We have to flip it to this side when we're talking about the deep. Right?
Oh yeah, of course. Oh. That was what I found most interesting about the game, was kind of the second half or the second act or whatever you want to call it, is once that Cambrian Explosion happens and things start to get more diverse between you and the other players, and you start to see these unique game-breaking cards, and every time you, like, again, it's a big deck and you're not going to play that many every game.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. You're going to see these wild abilities. You're going to be like, whoa, that card could combo with this one or whatever. You're going to see these possibilities kind of unravel.
That's the thing with that for me, is just like if the entire game had been around the, like, it doesn't have to be that the whole game was the deep deck, but if the whole game was unique cards that were maybe not all game breaking, then basically what I'm saying is like my least favorite thing of Oceans was the fact that there was so many duplicate cards, and it was just like whatever it is, like the 12 cards that keep coming up. I felt like the game goes through this phase of like, here's the less interesting phase of the game, and the more like, or if less interesting, more like you kind of, if you've played this a few times, you know what this phase plays out, like what kind of how it goes, even if you try different strategy.
Yeah.
And then you know you're going to get to this phase of the game where, okay, this is where things get interesting, or there's more stuff in it. And I just remember wondering, why is the whole game like this? Like, why make a game where its best part is part of the game, and then the rest of it where the game starts and might be people's first impression is the part where it's like, this is clearly less exciting once you've seen this other half of the game.
Yes.
Kind of thing. Like, it just feels like, I don't know why we're playing this first half of the game after I've played this game a couple times.
Yeah. So, and it's a tricky thing because I think it's the good and the bad. Like, so without having that first phase, people wouldn't be able to properly get engines going and build this kind of more like, I think it's the idea, even though I totally agree with you in the sense of like from a playability standpoint and just from how much fun you're having, like every subsequent time I played the game in that first half or first phase, I remember just thinking like, I can't wait to get to the deep phase and play these deep cards.
Yeah.
But sometimes that even phase, or sometimes you don't get many deep cards out, or you don't get to use them often enough because the game ends. So sometimes even when you got them in play, you didn't see them enough. Or you're playing that first half of the game or so kind of like anticipating that next part. But I guess that it gives the game a bit of an arc and it lets people feel like they're all kind of in the game because of how wild and powerful those deep cards are. I think if you got certain ones early and you got this crazy combo or you had this powerful predator, I've been calling them carnivores, they're predators in this game, it might be too hard to recover from. So I understand why they're introduced too late or like later in the game, but it also just kind of it has this divide where the first half you're feeling like you're in the second half of the game and then the second half doesn't last as long as we'd like it to. So
I liked it better than Evolution Climate, but that being said, it's still a game that I wouldn't personally choose. Like I would if someone suggested, I would play it again. Where Evolution Climate, I feel like I was getting to the point where I'd be like, I might sit that one.
Right, that was the impression I was getting from you. Yeah,
but so I would play it again. But yeah, there's just I'm not super interested in that in the first half of the game, and I still. As its tableau building aspects, there's just so many other games that I find more interesting in that genre than Oceans until it gets to that second phase. And to sit down and play like a game that's like 60, 90 minutes, which in my experience, like even at 2 players, and I was introducing to people, but like it has fallen in that frame. I don't want 45 minutes of that to an hour of that to be less interesting just to be like, oh, but wait till we get to this part of the game.
Yeah.
Like it's like telling someone like, watch this TV show, but the first 2 seasons are just okay. But when you get to season 3, like I've watched. Yeah,
you're like, but what if I don't like it at season 3? Like then it's like,
Can I just start at season 3? No. You won't understand what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I feel about this game.
Yeah, honestly, I feel pretty similar in terms of how much I enjoy it. Like I'm glad I've played it the times I did.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever request to play it again myself. I don't think I would ever turn down playing Oceans. I still like Evolution Climate more, like by quite a bit, I would say.
Yeah.
I just find the interactivity and the fact that you just feel more involved in the game consistently because of the fact that everything is simultaneous and because the stuff that you're doing from early in the game feels interesting, whereas this feels like it takes a bit of time to get going. And so what you said about the play time is spot on. Is like if I'm going to play a tableau builder, I usually want something shorter, or if I'm going to play something longer, it's got to be kind of snappier in terms of when it gets going, or there has to be less downtime or whatever. So this is going to be a play it from me. I think if you liked things about Evolution Climate, but you found it was either too punishing, or you didn't like the simultaneous aspect, or you just prefer the kind of underwater theme or something like that, then this might be worth checking out for you. If you already really like Evolution Climate, it's hard to say like whether or not it's worth owning this one as well. It couldn't hurt to check it out. There is an app as well where you can try it out. So, yeah.
Just because every single game that we have here we've both played, just based on the plays that we have, let's all give our pick between own, play it, skip it, even for the game we're not doing, just based on the plays we've played.
Sure.
Because
put me on the spot
we don't always have that for every game.
That's true.
So in this case, Oceans would have been a skip for me. So that's why I think it'll be interesting to see the difference between these.
Based on how you were talking about it, it didn't sound like a skip.
I skip only because again,
I thought Evolution Climate would be a skip, but this would be a play.
It would still be the only reason it would still be like I like it better than Evolution Climate, but not enough for me to own it, and not enough for me to be the one to suggest to play it. Like I guess play it if we're taking from the sense that I guess I would play it.
Yeah, like again. Do you regret the time you spent playing it a couple times?
Maybe we need to have maybe I'm saying I would play. Maybe it's between play and skip.
Well, it's because do you wish that you had skipped it, or are you like, oh no, it's fine. I enjoyed time enough, but I just need to play it more. Like, to me, that's a play it. Is like
I guess I would be happy to not play it again. But if someone suggested it at a game night, I would sit down and play it again.
Okay, sounds like we're in a similar.
I'm gonna skip
yeah,
it.
okay.
Skip it.
Okay.
Skip
I think it's play, but yeah, it's not even close. I think it's pretty much right in the middle. It's a pretty solid play for me.
Okay, sweet. All right, the first game I'm going to talk about is one that has come up in a couple other videos we've done, and this is our first, or my first time reviewing it now, and that is Veiled Fate. This is a review copy that was sent to us by AB Studio. This is a really unique hidden influence, kind of like in that genre of like social deduction game, but done in a very different way than other games I found. You're not going to be sitting down to play a game like One Night Ultimate Werewolf when you're sitting down to play this. It's a little bit more involved. But that being said, the way the box looks and the way that the game looks when it's set up makes it seem like it's going to be a way more complex game than it is. It is not a very complex game. It does very much lean on that deduction mechanic thing to be sort of where the complexity lies in terms of strategy and stuff. So what happens in this game is you have a big circular board. It's divided into a bunch of different areas all around the board, as well as some areas in the center of the board. And you are going to have these god characters. There's, I think, 8 of them in total. 8 or 9, I can't remember. I think it's 8. There might be one extra, I can't remember. But they're going to be all over the board in different regions, on different quest cards that appear in each region, in the city that's in the middle of the board. And anyone that's playing the game, and it does play, I think it's 2 to 8, or 2 to 8, anyone can manipulate any character. So you don't own one character, but everyone has a secret card to one of the color characters on the board, and that is who they are trying to make win the game, because then, or that's how they'll win the game, is if that god has the most renown at the end of the game. And so the key here is, as you start to move gods around, you don't want to make it too obvious. If I'm green, I don't want to constantly be moving green onto good locations where I might be gaining points, or onto valuable quest cards, or into places where green's going to gain renown, because it's going to be quickly become apparent that, okay, Dylan is clearly championing green, and now everyone can easily put a stop to me, and you can make characters lose renown, and suddenly I'm going to have a really, really hard time winning the game. Part of what you're trying to do here is, I don't want to make it clear that which god I'm controlling, but I'm also trying to figure out what god everyone else is controlling. I'm trying to maybe influence or move around different god characters that I think no one controls, so I think that I can then lead someone onto the scent that might be mine. Like, there's a whole lot of stuff going into like the hidden roles, the hidden deduction type elements in this game. That's where I think it sort of like excels. And there's, I guess I should still finish explaining the rules here. So there's all these quest cards, like I said, in all these regions, and all these quest cards are going to have these little circular spots that you can place these god characters on. And so when you move them on there, they're locked in, and once a quest card is completely filled up, both with god characters, it is then completed, and you are going to reveal these cards that you've been putting into decks next to these quest cards. Every time you put one of these god characters onto these quest cards, you're adding one of these little cards that has, essentially it's a feather on one side or a scorpion on the other side. I think they have like official names, but I'm just going to call them feather and scorpion, just like I always call resources, other colors.
They're fate cards. I don't remember what.
Fate cards, yeah. So it'll either be a feather, 2 feathers, a scorpion, 2 scorpions, or then I think it's an add 2 random cards to the deck. So after the quest is completed, you're going to shuffle all the cards. I think you add in you add in an amount of random cards equal to what it says on the quest, and in addition to what everyone else personally put in there, because they're trying to influence the vote. You're then going to flip these cards over, and you're going to see where the vote lies, and depending on where the vote ends up, that the god characters are either going to move to the right or the left. Usually there's some other things that can happen, but that's going to determine whether they lose points, whether they lose renown, whether they gain renown, whether they get smited and put into like this pit area where they have to take a couple actions to be able to get out of it. There's special powers that I won't get into that you can do to like circumvent some of the rules, transport gods around, where take them off spots they normally shouldn't.
You can look in cards in one of the stacks to get an idea of where it's going before.
They're expensive. Like the abilities don't get used much during the game. When they do, it's kind of a big deal that they do. But it's just an extra element that you can do, especially if your character's in a pinch or you're trying to really get people off your scent. So all that being said, the big element of this game does come to the fact, the rules are pretty bare bones, like in a good way, but where you're getting most of your enjoyment and where you're getting most of the strategy is trying to figure out everyone's roles. And every single time I played, the most fun I had was thinking I knew who everyone was, and then really anticipating the reveal at the end to see how right I was or how wrong I was, and then trying to throw people off my scent and having that go really poorly, or in like the case of the first one we played, it went really well, where right from the get-go, and it carried on through the whole game, everyone was convinced I was not one character, or that I was one character or something, and I was able to sort of ride that out. I think the character I actually was, they thought you were, or Corbin thought you were, but those moments are the parts that I just had the most fun with Veiled Fate, because I am already a fan of hidden role type games. So to see it done in this sort of different style with a bit of a more mature theme and with a play style that you don't normally and gameplay elements you don't normally see in hidden role games was really exciting. And I just had like a ton of fun on I think I played it 3 times now at 3 players, 4 players, and 4 players again, and I loved it every single time. I haven't played the highest player counts where it turns into a team game.
Yeah, that's 6 to 8.
6 to 8. The cool. I'm not usually always a fan of like team versus team versus team and stuff, but in this case, the cool element is that you don't know who your teammate is. So not only do you have to try to throw people off your scent and stuff, you also have to try to figure out which of the characters is also trying to influence the same god as you. That's pretty cool.
And the way that works is just like, let's say 2 different players will get dealt the green demigod card at the start, so they know they're green, but they don't know that the other person is green, kind of thing.
And at 7 players, 1 person doesn't have a teammate. So now in that version of the game, not only do you have to try to figure out who your teammate is, you have to figure out, do I even have a teammate? Which adds a whole other level of chaos. I haven't played that one, but that is how the 7-player count plays. So how did you enjoy Veiled Fate the time you played it?
So I have very conflicted feelings on it, because the highs are very high, and I feel like most of the time I'm playing this game, I have like a smile on my face and I'm looking around and other people are smiling, or there's this tension, and you feel like invested and engaged the whole time. Okay, that is like unquestionable for me. But there's certain things about the game that leave me wanting a little bit more. Part of it, I would say, is like, so there's a big memory element in this game, or it doesn't always have to come into play. But if, let's say, I'm playing in a way where I'm like taking mental notes about like, okay, Dylan moved that orange guy, the orange demigod early, and then did this or whatever. If I'm like really paying attention, there's a lot of little things that you can pick up on and try to piece things together.
Yeah.
But on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're not paying a lot of attention, or if you forget, or you're kind of just like trash talking people or whatever, there could be times where like halfway into the game, you're like, I don't remember who is Dylan moving earlier, who is this doing, or who is moving this or whatever. So the first time I played it, did something, and I tried to do something a little bit different the second time. And you're trying to throw people off the scent, right? Because like Dylan mentioned, like you don't want to reveal, if I'm orange, I don't want to tip my hand until like much, much later in the game.
Yeah.
But it felt like there were times like, okay, let's say I try to make a bluff that I'm blue early on. I move blue, I get this thing with blue points, blue is moving up, no one's really commenting on it, and then suddenly I do one action for like green, and someone's like, oh, moving green, oh, so this is green, and I'm sitting there being like, I wanted them to think I was blue. Why weren't they paying attention to those other, like I just took 4 turns in a row where I helped blue,
and then
I helped green once.
Now you gotta adapt.
I know, but there's that thing in my mind of being like, so the bluffs that I did weren't even like people didn't even notice what was going on, so then I'm like, so do I go back to blue, or just like now screw blue and just like go into some other color, or start? And you're trying to kind of manage like boosting multiple colors at the same time, but you don't have, like, you could technically just say like, I'm orange, screw it, I'm just gonna advance orange the whole game, and people can think I'm orange, or they can think I'm overplaying the bluff, whatever.
There's different, there are different, and the thing is, if you've played it enough times too, that could be a viable like bluffing strategy to actually play your character and have someone be like, well, he wouldn't just play his character, and then like, like
exactly.
You can approach. The cool thing about games like this is like, we were just talking before we started filming about modularity in games. I don't know if modularity is a word.
It is.
Okay.
Modularity, variability,
like modularity in games. And what's interesting is that hidden role games, hidden influence games, all those like that genre, the modularity is completely, even games like The Mind, like it's all player driven, right? Like the modularity comes from the people you're playing with, the strategies you choose to adopt, how you choose to bluff, and everything. Like the gameplay can remain somewhat the same, and there might be some elements that change there, but in general, it's how you approach it. And I guess what I was most impressed with in the 3 times I played Veiled Fate is that I think every time I played, there was someone at the table I had already played a previous time with, obviously except for the first time I played.
Right.
And I saw Corbin play it differently, and I saw myself play it differently, and I tried different things, and all of them are viable, all of them are interesting, and all of them are dependent on what's going on in the game, and also the people at the table. I just find that really attractive in a game, like to bring me back. Yeah. And I like that it goes up to a high player count. Like I don't have a ton of games in my collection that have that like simplistic rules that aren't like super long games, that aren't like also on the other end of the spectrum as party games that I can accommodate up to 8 players. So the fact that here's one that I can kind of like reliably pull out is really helpful. So I will say that Veiled Fate isn't owned for me, but it falls into a weird category of I'm going to compare it to Fife in this way, because when I did Fife on Wanna Play It, Skip It, I said this is not a game that's going to be in my top 50, but it's an own because
the niche it fills, kind of?
Yeah, the niche it fills, and for what it is, it's exactly a game I want in my collection. Veiled Fate is, I don't think it'll crack my top 50 games of all time, but it's a game I want in my collection that I will consistently play. There are people and friends I have that talk about it and say like, oh, next time make sure you bring Veiled Fate. Like, they love it. I enjoy playing it. It has this variable player count. It has an option to do team play. There are some modular aspects with like the city cards that are out in each game and the age cards that are out in each game to see how things change that I can see myself getting to the table a lot. So I don't want to get rid of it. I do want to keep it in my collection. And so I realize that it is an own. It's just that weird one where it's like, it's an own that I like many other games better than it, but it's an own for me. So
Okay. For me, it would be a play it if I was reviewing it. It would be closer to the skip than play, or sorry, skip than own. But again, it's one of those things like I've had fun playing it, and each like I wouldn't turn down playing it again, but I don't think I'm ever going to request to play it again. But I think part of it is like for the duration of the game, and I wish the task cards or whatever, or the quests or whatever they're called, were just a little bit more interesting, because it's usually just either like gain 1 point, gain 2 points, lose a point, or smite are usually the only options. So, and when there's multiple cards out and some of them have similar options, sometimes I just feel like, is there as much decision space as I'd like? But I really appreciate the kind of like sandbox feel of like, do whatever you want, move whichever demigods, move all of them, move one of them, you know, mess with your opponents, try to get yourself points, whatever, and that aspect that some games have, like even something like, it's a very different game from Dominion, so don't like take this comparison with a grain of salt, but you know in Dominion where you're kind of like building your engine, then it's kind of like when do you start buying the victory point cards that clog your day. In this, it's almost like, when do you say, I don't care if everyone knows I'm orange, I'm getting orange points. Because there comes a point where you cannot bluff anymore, and you're like, I don't want people to know I'm this color, but if if that color's 4 points back of the lead and it's late in the game, I have no choice. I have to advance my own goals. So interesting game, and one that I definitely like to play again, but it'd be a play it for me.
Play it for Carlo, own it for me. That's Veiled Fate. On to your next one.
All right, and we should just say the production value,
really
everything Ivy Studios does is just like really, really nice.
I believe this is the deluxe version that they sent us, but very good components. It's just a pleasure to put it to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next one I'm going to be talking about is a game I have spoken about on the channel a couple times in different videos, different formats already. This is Fire and Stone. So for those of you who have been watching the channel for a while, you might remember this was one of my, I think it was like my number 2 or 3 most anticipated game for 2022. We also talked about this in a video earlier at the beginning of this year, which was our biggest surprises from 2022. So feel free to go check that out. But so basically, this is a 2 to 4 player game designed by Klaus-Jürgen Wrede, same designer as Carcassonne, which was my gateway game and still one of my favorite games of all time, published by Pegasus Spiel. So yeah, this one was a review copy. And it's basically a game of exploration. So you have a map, and you've got your initial scout, which is like your kind of worker on the map. And the map is divided into regions that are marked kind of with these little token or little face down tiles in every single one, marked either 1, 2, or 3. So at the start of the game, you can only go in region 1, and then there's, you know, as sort of the game unfolds, you're going to eventually be able to unlock access to region number 2 and region number 3. And whatnot. But basically you have your own little player board in front of you as well as the main map, and on your turn you take your scout and you move it 1 or 2 spaces adjacent. Later on in the game you're also going to unlock a second scout, and then you'll be able to move both scouts each 1 to 2 spaces. So there's these face down tiles, and so every type of tile in the game has a discovery effect as well as a, I don't remember what the other one's called, but it's like the revealed effect. So you get a tile, you flip it over, you see what it does. You're going to gain kind of like an immediate benefit of some sort. You know, you might get a bag to hold food. You might discover like a fire, like a bonfire. You might discover a forest, which is going to have these. You're going to put a stack of tokens that only you can look through secretly and pick one, and you put them back, and then other players can go there later. So you're uncovering these spots, but then once they're uncovered, other people can go to those places and access those spots for something else. Like once the fire is there, they can go to the fire to cook the food or cook the animals they have into food. But you know, the person who discovered the fire gets like a bonus point. So there's usually either you can do the same thing as the discovery but with a lesser reward, or it's a completely different thing that you're doing once that thing has been discovered, if that makes sense. You can also pick up there's like acorns and apples and mushrooms that you can eventually collect multiples of in your kind of pouch or whatever, and then you can trade them in. So there's that kind of stuff going on. There's these huts that you uncover, and that's part of the kind of arc of the game. When it's, I don't remember what your 8th hut gets revealed on the map or something like that. It unlocks the Region 2 area, and then same with Region 3 unlocks in a similar way with a certain number of huts. And then when I think it's the 11th hut is revealed or something, it triggers the end of the game. Yeah. And you're also placing these huts. I should mention there's an area majority aspect where you're kind of fighting over these spots, and if you flip a tile and it's a hut, then you put a hut of your color, and that basically is going to count for a point. But so all the huts at the end of the game count for a point each, but you're also getting an extra point for every area in which you have the majority of huts. Yeah. But to place a hut where there already is one, you have to pay food based on how many huts are there. So every subsequent hut that gets placed in the same spot when you're fighting to try to get the majority back, you're paying more and more food. That's pretty much the last thing I'll say rules-wise is the cave. There's the cards too. There's technology cards or inventions or whatever that you get throughout the game. They can give you abilities, or instead of drawing it for the ability, you can just draw a point card to just say, I don't need the ability, I'm just going to draw this card that gives me 3 or 4 points or whatever. But the caves, because I'm going to come back to the caves a couple times. So there's every game, there's a stack of maybe 20 or 30 of these cave cards, and every game there's going to be one cave card that you draw from this deck, and it's going to have a sort of it's going to tweak the rules slightly, and there's going to be one tile on the board somewhere that is going to be the cave, and once it's discovered, you're going to flip that cave card and reveal it to everyone, and everyone's going to know what you saw in the cave that game.
And I think it comes up in Age 2?
I think so. I think it's usually in Age 2, yeah. So
again, it's almost in Oceans where there's the halfway point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're it has in that sense, I like the arc. You start with only those 2 food bags built into your board, so you can get more food bags, and you can the way that the map unveils itself and stuff is interesting. It has a bit of that arc. Yeah. So I wanted to like this game so much more than I actually do, and it's not. I don't hate it or anything. I'll say right now. Actually, I'll get there in a second, maybe, because I'm still off. It's either play it bordering on skip it, or it's skip it just barely get. I think it would be a play it on the very, very low end. Here's the thing. For a while, I thought I was going to say this was a skip it, but the more I thought about it, I think that skip it comes from the expectations that I maybe unfairly placed on the game, specifically because of the designer and also the publisher. We've played a lot of games by Pegasus Spiel, and we like most, if not all, the ones that we've a lot of their games are really, really solid games. Yep. But it just felt like every aspect of the game, when I read the rules, every aspect that got me excited ended up being a letdown, especially the caves. The caves is probably the biggest one, because there's this one thing that you're part of the biggest thing in the game is you're going out and exploring, you're looking what's going to be under this tile. It's ooh, it's the excitement of almost like a legacy game opening envelopes. The whole game is, let's see what this random thing gives me. Let's see what this random thing gives me. Yeah. Oh, I found the cave. Oh, you're excited. What's the cave going to be? And then it's just some the caves just didn't. You agree with? I think you. Sorry, I shouldn't put words in your mouth. But I remember when we played, you seemed to feel the same way about the caves didn't do enough.
It's because there's only one cave card in the game. As soon as you say so you have this deck of 20 or whatever number it is, and you're shuffling, you're put 1, and when that gets revealed, this one card is going to change the rules. If you're only going to get one card that in an entire session of playing a board game, and that's going to change the rules, and it comes up randomly when this cave's found, it should have a bigger impact. We've played tons of games with player powers at the start of the game that have way bigger impact, cards that come up during the game that have bigger impact, deep cards, all this stuff. Many games have this, and this one should have been way more impactful. It should have done something where when you get to the middle of the second age, as soon as that gets flipped, everyone's strategy has to adjust. You have to now look and say, I've been doing it this way, or I've been exploring this way. Now that this is out here, here's this really substantial way to get more points, or here's this substantial way that I have to now combat my opponent, something. Or there need to be 3 cave cards out, 1 for each age in a game or something, more of them. With the one cave card being in the game and it having that low impact, it just made every game be you know what I mean?
I will disagree with you on one thing. I still think I would have liked it to stay with just one cave card. I didn't want more. I just wanted that, because I think it would have then diluted the impact of finding one if there's 3. Yeah. But I just think that one had to have a bigger impact, so that if you, there's the incentive to go explore the unexplored area, so that if you're the first to the cave and then the other players are halfway across the map, they're oh my god, I need to get there. That ability is so good. But as it is, it was just sure, if I'm near there, I'll probably stop by the cave, but if not, it's not a big deal. I can do a similar thing elsewhere. Like, it just didn't have a big enough impact on the game.
The other thing that it's been a little bit since I played, so I don't remember the exact rules around it, but the one thing other thing I didn't like was, I think it's in the everyone's unique end goal card or whatever.
The task, yeah.
I remember having one. I might even had something like this on both the games, where it was something to the effect of, for every hut you have that you own next to water or
next
river,
to a forest or something
like
that. Yeah.
And the problem is that the spots where you place huts are completely random depending where those things get flipped.
Yeah.
So as you flip, you could realize in that game where the huts ended up. It's like, well, I only have 3 spots that I can go to next to a forest. Or in this game, they all ended up next to forest somehow or whatever. Maybe that's not possible, but because there's such a fluctuation there, it's like, here's this private thing I can go for, but how effective I can go for it is completely random.
Yeah.
And that works in some games. I don't think it works in a game where it's about exploration, because this game makes the reveal disappointing in so many different ways.
Yeah.
You can reveal a hut and be like, oh, it's not next to what I need it to be. You can reveal a cave card and go, oh, that's nowhere what I was near as exciting as I thought it was going to be. Like, they put things into the game to make the reveals less exciting, and the entire game, all you're doing is revealing tiles.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's basically, there's so much randomness, and I'm not opposed to games with a lot of randomness, but the more randomness there is, I want the game to be shorter.
Yeah.
And the fact that this takes probably I would say 45 minutes to an hour on the box is pretty accurate, I think.
Yeah.
It just felt to me like the game, when I won Fire and Stone, I didn't feel like I played particularly well, did anything to really earn the win, and when I lost, it didn't feel like I could look back and say like, oh, I lost because of this happened or because of this happened. So it kind of just felt like, not that the game was playing itself, because you do still have the option of like, which direction do I go in? But again, with so many face down tiles, like, what's this going to be? Oh, it's the thing I needed perfectly. The next person goes like, what's this? Oh, I don't have any use for this.
Yeah.
Or it's like, if you're not getting the things you need for food, then how are you supposed to actually fight for the majorities? And it's like, that's completely out of your control. And the last thing I think I'll say is just, I feel like every time we played, the points range was exactly the same.
Yeah,
the winner always
similar.
had either 22 or 23, and the lowest points was always like 18. Like the gap was always like 4 or 5 points at most. And to me,
and it was I think in all of them too was almost like evenly like split between them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, oh, I'm 1 point ahead of you, you're 2 points ahead of you. And like when you flip a fire token and that gets you a point, or where you get the huts, or whether you have the food to fight for majorities, like 1 or 2 points in this game can be really valuable. So at the end, it just kind of felt like, how much control did I have? How much did these decisions that I made throughout the game amount to?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think ultimately, if I'm taking my like bias of expectation of this designer who designed Carcassonne out of the mix, I think it just barely gets into the play it. But it's kind of like, I am like almost disappointed that I went out of my way to sort of like get a review copy of this and like not force people to play, but I mean, it's like after the first couple plays, I could tell like, I don't know if this is going to be something I love, but we got to play it enough to review it, kind of thing. So it's also fine. It's decent.
You anticipated it a lot, which is like,
I know
it's like another layer of letdown, disappointment, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
I would actually align with you. I would say it's a low end play for me. It's close to a skip as well, but again, there's enough interesting things that it does still, and there's aspects of the mechanics and moving these 2 characters around and like flipping over tiles that can still be engaging, that can still be fun, and that can still have moments in games where it works probably as intended. But again, for me, there's just too many moments where a reveal is disappointing in multiple different areas for a game that's all about reveals. I feel like that was the miss that I get hung up on.
Yeah, but the turns are like quick enough, the gameplay is quick enough, the rules are simple enough that like to play it once or twice is like, I don't think anyone's gonna be like super disappointed or offended or anything, but I just don't know how much like replayability is there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I don't know who is the target audience, because if you're going for a family weight game, I think the rules are still a little too much, and also the theme and setting is just like, there's so many other family games that have like anthropomorphic animals or some exciting theme, but it's just like, it's kind of like prehistoric times, you're exploring a map. Like, and for more experienced gamers who might be into that theme, the gameplay I think is a bit of a letdown. So barely squeaks into the play it category. Again, that is Fire and Stone from Pegasus Spiel.
All right, last game we're going to look at. This is from Game Brewer. This is also a review copy. It's a game that I had on my list for a while when I first heard about it. Happy to finally got it.
Yeah, we almost backed this on Kickstarter a while ago. Yeah,
and that is Oak. So Oak is a worker placement game with some pretty interesting twists to the work. Well, I shouldn't say twists. Well, yeah, they're twists, but they're not like completely unique. There are other games that have done some things that they're doing in here, but I think that they implement them really well. So you have this board that has this big tree in the middle, and you have a bunch of action spaces that, I shouldn't say a bunch, I think it's like 3 different main action spaces, and each of those 3 action spaces has 3 different areas you can go to on it. So you're going to be taking your druid characters and placing them onto one of these 9-ish available action spaces that tie into the cards that are in your hand, or you're going to be placing them on the roots of the tree and then ascending the tree on one of these multiple paths to try to be the first one to make it to one of these sort of like end game scoring objectives. When I said that you have a hand of cards, everyone's going to start with the same cards. The cards are going to dictate what happens on the action spaces that you actually put your druids on. So unlike some worker placement games, or most worker placement games, where you'll look at a spot on the board and say, when I go there, I get 2 stone, or whatever it is, and you place there. An action spot for you can be the same for everyone else if they use that card, but if they use a different card, it can mean something else for that person. So me going to a certain spot can mean something different for you going to that spot, right? And I can still be stealing something from you, but it could be a different strategy you're going for, which is really interesting. Yeah. You also have other cards that don't start in your hand that you can acquire as you go, and there's even modular aspects to this, that there's one card that might not always be available in every game of Oak you play. We had one where it was available, and I think I did get it. It's a really overpowered card, but it's only available when I think it's one of the artifacts or one of the potions is I think
it was a potion.
Yeah, when that potion is specifically in that game, then it's possible to get this card, which is just an overpowered card, gives the action spaces a lot more impact. The tree part I mentioned in the middle, so you're going to be able to take on every single card an Oak action, so every card has dual uses, which we're a big fan of multiple use cards. So you can use it for its main actions, or you can use it for the Oak action, which will dictate which branch of the tree you go up, and then you're just ascending. You get a bonus on some of the spots you land. It's a pretty linear path once you pick, I think every branch, like at the start bottom, you pick 1 of 3 branches, and every branch, I think, splits one more time after that to one of the different end game objectives. So there's not like a ton of variety of the paths you can go, but there's enough to kind of have it where every time you play, you can ascend a different branch, go to a different end game
objective.
It's
6 end points though, right? Because I think each of the branches then splits in 2 at the end, so there's 6 like final rewards. Correct. I think. But
and if you both land on the end spot on the same round, I believe you can 2 people can get there. But if the round ends and only one person's got there, it becomes locked.
Yeah, so you lock. Yeah,
you can try to beat people to the punch.
Yeah, a bit of a race element.
Yeah, so that's just the board. There's also
the more that you send druids up the tree, the less you have those druids available to do other things, right?
And you don't have access to all your druid characters as action pawns right at the start of the game. You have to do actions to be able to acquire them. You have to make room for druids on your board. There's also artifacts that you can acquire, and every player board can, I think, accommodate 2 artifacts. There's creature cards, and creature cards you can accommodate a variable amount depending on which druid board you start with. Some have an easier time getting creature cards than others, as well as you can pay resources to be able to increase the amount of creatures you can get. There's also 3 general resources that everyone has access to, and you can have a max of 9, and then obviously 0 is the minimum, and you're acquiring those during an income phase depending on what you've done during the game, what action spaces you've gone to. It seems like there's a lot going on. There is, but once you have the rules down, it is not really that complex a game, especially because the actions are just what's in your hand. And when it's not your turn, you can easily look at your hand and say, these are the actions that are available. And it's all iconography, but the iconography, once you understand it, is really straightforward. It's you pay this to get this, or you do this to get this. Like it's all really simple stuff. There's nothing that's like a hidden complexity in there. And it has tons of modular aspects to it. The creature cards that come up, the artifacts that come up, the potions that are in the game, all can drastically change. There's a potion that adds a completely different druid upgrade. I didn't even talk about the druid upgrades. Every druid can be upgraded into one of, I think it's like 6 basic druid powers, and then there's a 7th that's only available if that potion's in the game that has the powers of all 6 druids, which is completely overpowered. And all of those make the druids able to circumvent rules of the game. So normally there's a rule where you can't go onto an action space that someone else has already gone into without paying another worker pawn. So you essentially have to send 2 there. With that special druid, it can now go anywhere. Yeah. So there's different. I won't go over them all, but they all circumvent break a different rule of the game.
Yeah. The fact that you have the actual physical components, like the little cape or the little hat,
the maples.
Like
it's amazing to slide the little satchel or the hood onto the character.
Because then you can see you don't. It's not like someone has a card in front of you. You're like, wait, which druids are? You look at the board, and it's like, oh, yours has that cape on. Yours has the
Yeah. It's. I'll just say I love this game. It's not my favorite worker placement game, but it's one of my favorites. And I've played it 3 times now. I've felt the same way about it every time I've played it. At different player counts. I think I've played it at 4, 3. The only player count I haven't played it at is 2, which for most games that's the first.
And there's a solo mode. You haven't played solo.
Yes, I haven't played the solo mode. So, but I for worker placement games, at least in my experience, I enjoy them at 2 players. But usually for me, 3 to 4 ends up being the sweet spot. Yeah. And all the games at 3 and 4 have been phenomenal for me. I really, really enjoy the game. It's one where because I've had a different strategy every game. I've had a different starting player power every game. I've had a different because the potions are different every game, because which artifacts and creatures come out every game is different. I've been able to find something different to kind of do each game that changes fundamentally the way I'm personally playing and the way the entire group is having to adjust the strategy. There's just so many things that were different and felt purely fun. I left the game being like, oh, that was just a really fun worker placement game that I was just really impressed. And it's almost the opposite of the Fire and Stone, where I didn't anticipate this as much as you anticipated Fire and Stone or for as long. But I remember I came in and it checked every box I was hoping it would check. And I think I went in even trying to pull my expectations back, being like, there's been enough times where I'm excited about a game and I just haven't looked into it enough, and I sit down and play and go, yeah, it's okay. This one landed for me. I love it. This one is an own for me, whereas this was an own for a different reason. This is an own where I could see this game. The more I play it, it could be a game that would be in my top 50. I will come back to this. I will suggest it. I will introduce more people to it. Maybe after 10 plays, it's a game that, because the action spaces are a little bit more limited than other worker placement games, or you kind of have seen more of the creature cards and artifacts and stuff, or the potions, that you start to lose some of that luster. But I feel like for me that would probably have to take, for me to have seen all the different potions, ways things that change, I'm probably talking 6 to 10 plays. And at that point I feel like I can't really knock a game too much for losing a bit of its replayability when I've already replayed it.
Yeah, I think there's 5 different starting player boards, right? So even if you play each of those ones twice or whatever, you're gonna get a different experience every time. And again, in combination, like you said, with all the different the artifacts, the creatures in play, all that kind of stuff. So
I'm curious. You've played it twice, right?
Yes, once with 3 and once with 4.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think.
So I like it as well, not as much as you. Yeah. It's a play it for me. Part of it might just be because of the sort of what are the comparables? Yeah. If I'm going to play a sort of medium weight worker placement Euro game that is around hour, 90 minutes ish, maybe with a teacher, I think maybe it could have taken us maybe around 2 hours the first time we played or something like that. But in that kind of weight, for anyone who watches the channel, you obviously know Agricola and Keyflower, my 2 favorite worker placement games. But beyond that, next sort of tier, I would probably have games like Noosefjord and even Cryo. Cryo has a much simpler rule set than this. I'd probably have that ahead of this. It's a solid worker placement game, and if nothing else, I don't know, I can't remember if you mentioned this, but this is a first-time designer, Wim Goossens. I'm immediately curious to play everything else that this guy is going to design from now on, because the ideas are super interesting. It feels like maybe it was, I don't know really quite if I can put my finger on where it feels like it could have used a little more development. I
can name one. The one area that sticks out to me that it just feels a little bland amongst so much other stuff that feels interesting is foraging for the items that are in the bag. Because if you don't use a druid, if your druids that are not able to be used as workers placement druids yet, they're sort of just at the roots of the tree, but they're not ascending the tree. If you can't do anything with them, you have to take an action to just move them to the forest and forage. And foraging is, you have a bag full of ingredients, and you constantly have some that are flipped face up. You go there, you take one of the face up ones, you grab a new from the bag, put it there. But early on, there's so many turns where it's like, oh, I'll just go to the forest, I'll take a berry. Oh, I'll just go to the forest, take a mushroom. And it's like by the end, I was like, it's not that I hated that aspect of the game. I just felt like it was such a tedious, not even tedious, it was a boring, monotonous thing that like, yes, what I'm getting those for is exciting, but the act of getting them wasn't exciting. And amongst so many other things in the game that I felt were like beautiful and vibrant and interesting and engaging, that's just one that every time I did it, I was just like, this is clearly my least favorite aspect of the game.
Right.
It's not horrible or anything. It's just that amongst a bunch of good stuff for me, it's the one thing that kind of stuck out. Like, yeah, that could have maybe added. There could be something else added there just to make it a little bit more interesting.
Right. Yeah, I think maybe for me, part of it, I think, is that considering they give you the starting player board, you almost feel like you have to play into it.
Yeah.
In game, like, and I want to be clear because there's some games where I really like having starting player powers, or it's saying like you're going to play the game slightly different than this person. But I feel like once you're on that course, like they determine so much of your play style because it might be like you have an extra slot to carry an extra creature, or you can go where other players, druids go without having to like pay the extra druids, or there's like you have your personal spot on there where you can do some extra action that's normally only available on the board. And it's like if you're not leaning into what your character board allows you to do, you're probably going to fall behind. But by leaning into it, it doesn't give you as much freedom as I'd like to then branch off of that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So most of it comes down to I think it's similar to you where like the 5 or 10 plays might be like the point where you're like, I think I've seen enough from the game and don't need to kind of go back to it. And I think if there were fewer really good worker placement games out there, I might be more into it. So I would happily play it any time. I don't think it's one that I'll request similar to Veiled Fate. I do like this more than Veiled Fate by a fair margin though. Solid game, and especially if you're just kind of tired of, if you've played a lot of worker placement games and you're just tired of seeing the same things or whatever, like definitely check this out because there's some cool stuff here where even my minor quibbles with the game, there's things that I was like, this is really cool. I've never seen this before, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see other designers iterate off this and take aspects of, even if it's the aspect of the druids playing off the tree and going from the roots up, or the way you modify them with the components. There's a lot of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, and it doesn't have tons of similarities to this game, but I compared in my head a lot to Dune Imperium because of the card aspect with worker placement. The fact that like they integrate differently, but in Dune Imperium, there's you using cards in conjunction with it controlling what spaces you can go to. Where in this game, you're using cards for what spaces do. And I will say, like, I like Dune Imperium a lot more than Oak.
Yes, that's another one I forgot to mention actually, in terms of worker placement.
This is not like an upper echelon worker placement game for me, but out of like, there's a lot of worker placement games and a lot get released every year, and this was the first one in a while for me of new games or new to me games where I played and I was like, okay, I really like this game.
Yeah, and, of the last few years, it's definitely one of the better ones, up there with like Hallertau and Cryo, and I might be forgetting some other ones.
Yeah, I like it better than Cryo, but less than Dune Imperium. That's where it lands for me between the ones we kind of talked about here.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that's Oak. It's an own it for me. I really liked it. I played for Carlo, and those are our 4 games.
Yeah.
Yep.
So again, other than Oceans, the other 3 were review copies. So I guess I think I had them all as play it. Varying levels of play it.
Varying levels of play.
I would say that Oceans and Oak would probably be the 2 highest up for me, followed by Veiled Fate, and then Fire and Stone, a reasonable margin below them. How about you?
I got 2 Own It's here, Oak and Veiled Fate, a skip it on Oceans, and a slight play out on Fire and Stone.
Do you like Fire and Stone more than Oceans? It's surprising to me.
It's weird.
Is it just based on
it's weird because it's that's all.
We're not giving it a rating. We're talking about it from an ownership perspective,
So for me, it's also the genre too. Like, Oceans is almost certainly a better game than Fire and Stone. It's just that like I could see myself coming back to Fire and Stone one more time to like. Because something about that revealing things, like, I'll do that one more time.
Quick, there's very little downtime.
Exactly.
It's easier to jump back
With
in
Oceans,
than to get
I'm
back
like,
into.
I just don't know that I want to sit down for a full one again. But so I would say mine goes Oak, Veiled Fate, and then Fire and Stone and Oceans are probably like really close to each other, but I'd give Fire and Stone the edge.
Cool.
But, so those are our 4 games. Thanks for watching our first video together back in a while. There'll be more soon, and I think I mentioned in the last video, but in case you didn't watch that one, for me, at least personally, you're going to see me become more active again on the channel probably around the November timeline as we go into the holidays. That's when my work schedule becomes way more manageable. I'm traveling a lot for work right now and stuff too, so I'm not even around to be able to like film stuff or engage and stuff. So when I'm back,
Or most importantly, to play games.
exactly, I had to play, and we have,
back and play
and we
some
have to be able to
games.
play
Yeah.
games to actually talk about them. So around then, you'll see me around a lot more often. I'll have played more games. I'll be playing more games. I'll have more to talk about going into the holidays, into our like November, December content. So.
Yeah, and Braden has trained, I don't know when this video will come out with other ones that we have on the go, but if I haven't mentioned this in another one yet by this point, yeah, Braden has trained me recently on filming, editing, audio, all that kind of stuff. So you'll be seeing more of me in the near future as well, but I'm just kind of slow getting through the, working through filming and editing for the first time.
Some of the
on my own
B-roll
kind
that
of
you've been
stuff,
seeing on the channel has been Carlo's B-roll that he shot. So if you've been liking the B-roll, give Carlo a shout out in the YouTube comments below.
I have to start getting way more efficient with that. Spending too much time, too many shots to sift through, but anyways, part of a process.
Yeah,
Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.